you doing, wrestling fans? And welcome to another edition of John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast. We are the only wrestling podcast that brings you back 30 years with vintage audio featuring some of the biggest names of that time. Today's show is no exception. The Pro Wrestling Spotlight covered all the news stories and breaking developments that happened in real time, and now we get to relive those moments right here on this podcast. Today, we will review the May 29th Pro Wrestling This Week program from 1993, which originally was broadcast on 1440 AM WNYG. I want to remind everybody, if you haven't become a patron, now's the time to do so. For $5 a month, that gets you in the door. You have access to over 200 plus shows of the original Pro Wrestling Spotlight radio show. More is released each and every week. There are so many other exclusives there. And depending on your level, you could participate on this program. You could receive on that Patreon account 8mm films, videos, and so much more. We're always planning on incorporating some new elements to it as well. We'll keep you updated on that. So go to patreon.com/John Arezzi. The membership really helps with the production costs for this program. And once again, it's patreon.com/John Arezzi. Right now, I want to bring on Marsh, our producer and creative director.
Hey.
Marsh, how you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Doing good. Feeling good.
Staying out of the marsh pit?
Yeah. I started working out this week.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I got a little gym membership. I got one of my buddies who was an alumni from the old Wrestling on the Rocks crew. He's a personal trainer now, and
you're out there doing it. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So I'm nice, good, and sore.
Yeah. My leg's a little sore. I just got back from my walk, and the older you get, the tougher it gets. But got to do it. But anyway, we're going to have a little bit of an interesting show today. We're not reviewing two shows. When I first contacted you and I uploaded 3 shows, your opinion was, let's cover this morning show from May 29th first. And then next week, I guess we will. No, this is morning or
this is the night.
This is a nighttime show. It's not even Pro Wrestling This Week.
Yeah, no, this is Pro Wrestling Spotlight. Yeah,
because there wasn't even a tape of the 5/29/93. Because now I'm looking at the original cassette and it says PWS, which is not PWTW. So this is the nighttime show. Thank you so much for correcting me.
Yeah.
Let you know where my head is. And the other shows that I had uploaded were the Pro Wrestling This Week show from June the 5th and the Pro Wrestling Spotlight from June the 5th. And you said, we can't do all 3 shows because what next week's podcast is going to be is just too freaking crazy.
There's just too much between those 3. Next week's is so crazy that I don't want to not give that the time it deserves. And then this week's was, to me, just really fascinating.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to just skip over it. And I was like, if we're doing 3, we're only getting 2 clips each. And there's a lot in this one that I was surprised to hear. So yeah, I wanted to make sure we focused a little bit.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised too. And I didn't even have the guests listed on the tape. And then I discovered after listening to it, it was actually Jim Herd.
Yeah. When you uploaded the audio for me and you'd put, because you always write the name of the episode and the date and who's on it. And you said Jim Herd. And I was like, what? Yeah. What is, how did he come back? So
yeah, and we'll get into that. We'll get into that for sure. But just a quick preview of next week's show. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, but the evening show from June the 5th, 1993 could be one of the most crazy shows ever in the history of Pro Wrestling Spotlight, when Paul E. Dangerously returns to the studio out of his freaking mind. Out of his mind. Eddie Gilbert also calls in. Paulie brings his nightclub buddy, this guy Matt DeMatt, who had a little bit of a role in ECW, and Matt DeMatt was this nightclub. I don't know if he was a bouncer, if he's a promoter. He was just nuts. But he was one of Paulie's dearest friends back then. So next week is going to be off the chain. And tonight's show is a little bit off the chain too, and it's a lot of surprising things. And there were some things that were coming out that we follow up with. So it's going to be an interesting one for everybody to take a listen to. And I was very surprised when I heard it for the first time in 30 years.
The fact that you didn't have the note, that had to be a little jarring when you're playing it, and all of a sudden you're like, all right, we're going to go to Jim Herd. And you're like, what?
Huh?
And the fact that you didn't write it down. Remember, like, was it a couple weeks ago, you had done the episode where you ended it playing a Patty Loveless song, and you wrote that note to yourself 30 years ago. This is when I plugged Patty on my show. This one, you had 30 plus minutes with Jim Herd. This was over half your show. And no note to yourself that Jim Herd was even on it.
No. I was a mess back then anyway. There was so much going on between the tours that I was putting together for Southeast Asia, which I really never brought up publicly until, I guess, this episode. And then, of course, next week, we talk about it in a lot more detail. And, of course, putting together the AAA stuff with Ron Scholar. It was a very busy time. And it was really a time for me as well where I was not very diligent on even saving a bunch of shows in the future. So when I was looking at the tape, I was like, why don't I have 4 episodes? Why do I stop? And why is there 3 shows missing here, 2 shows missing here? So really, it's kind of a time where I'm getting distracted by all these other outside ventures, and I was just out of my mind, I think.
Well, and even in this episode and next week's episode, you do break down that there's a series of episodes you will be missing, and Mickey B jumps on to say that he's going to be taking over. He's going to be an extra hour long to cover your spot. So it could also be that there's a number of those.
Yeah, but I always kept the shows in like numerical order, like show 221, 222, 220. And then there's like, why is there 3 shows missing here from this month?
Numerically.
Yes. So that was distressing. And I searched far and wide and I was like, they're just gone.
Yeah.
They're just gone. Huh. So anyway, we'll get to it. Hey, listen, I'm already getting some tweets from people. They're like, I don't know what we're going to do when you run out of shows. Well, we talked about that, and we may just start from the beginning again. We really might. I mean, I think that's kind of the best way to do it because there's a fresh coat of paint on it. And all those shows that were on the Arcadian Vanguard network for the initial run with Brian Last, those shows are now not available anywhere because he took them all down from all the I guess what you call it, the RSS feeds are no longer available. They're gone. Unless someone downloaded them and taped them, they're gone forever. So beginning again makes some sense.
It does. You don't own those older ones, and the way that it is now, you do own. And so to be able to review your stuff is important.
Yeah, and they pulled the clips like you will, so there may be different clips that people have never heard before. There's different perspective. We could bring on guys like Broadway Sonny Blaze and Donny Laible, now that he has his computer set up where he can actually be on camera, which is really nice. So, but we won't try to bring the Power Twins back unless we're on acid or something and we decide to kind of go with the flow.
John, I'm ripped right now. Let's call the Power Twins. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that reunion show has gotten a lot. I mean, we put that up for patrons only, and that's up on YouTube. It's a Patreon only private link, and I don't know what people think about it because I haven't heard any response from it. Yeah,
I do appreciate the Patreons too because I noticed that one had a huge spike in the viewership for the Patreon exclusive ones. Yeah. It looks like the Patreons are waiting for visually for the YouTube one to drop publicly, which is a huge help to us actually. So when you look at the numbers and saw that Patreon exclusive that wasn't going to be on the public, that one had a much bigger amount. It made me I've always loved and respected our Patreons, but this was all like, these guys are really helping us out. This is great.
Yeah. That was good. And of course the Superstar Billy Graham special from last week is been getting great response, and people are really digging that with the conversation with George Napolitano and Keith Elliott Greenberg and that vintage audio. And you've done a really great job with the visual elements on the channel. I do want to remind everybody, please go to youtube.com/Pro Wrestling Spotlight and subscribe to it, because you're going to get a lot of great content. And what this show is for people who listen only on audio, which is great, fine, well and good. We love it. I mean, this is where most of people hear the podcast. But going over to YouTube, it just brings a whole new element when you can visually see it, when you have the drawings and you have the photographs and you have all the other video elements that you creatively put into each and every one of the shows. It's going to be cool. And we've talked about it today that we're going to be doing a lot more on the YouTube channel. There's going to be a lot of new content we're going to be starting to put up there so people can really experience what this era of wrestling was all about.
Yeah, and really experience what your archive holds, because I feel like we just start dabbling with it. And so it's going to be really cool to dig in deep.
Yeah. So anyway, things are looking up. We just need more patrons, please.
Yeah.
$5 a month. I mean, I think Rich Williams, our dear patron friend, said it's only $1.25 a week, guys.
Yeah.
And that's really what it is.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
Falls out of
your entree anyway. I mean, and of course the super fans are going to go up those different tiers, but we need more of those $5 a month people out there to come in. And of course we love everyone who's a patron anyway. So that's it. We'll see you next week.
Yep. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening, and have a great night, everyone. Let's get started with this these shenanigans.
Let's rewind the tapes. So this one, it opened up because you had talked about before, you didn't do a show Memorial Day, and you just kind of mentioned that in the opening, but you bring on Donny. Slamboree had just taken place with WCW and brought out all the legends. I think they were calling them old timers at the time, which is interesting.
Yeah.
And I left in Donny coming on the Capsule and afterwards because there was a few notable things in that whole conversation. So let's start it off with Donny like I like to.
Each and every week, as we do every show, the top of the hour, we bring on our friend Donny Laible from upstate New York to fill us in on what's been happening in pro wrestling this week. And Donny, are you there with us tonight?
Yes, I am, John, and lots to talk about. As you said, speaking of a big weekend, World Championship Wrestling had their big weekend last week, and that leads off the Capsule. WCW did present their Slamboree pay-per-view show last Sunday from the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia. Among the highlights, the British Bulldog Davey Boy Smith scored a disqualification victory over WCW champion Big Van Vader. Barry Windham successfully defended his National Wrestling Alliance heavyweight title against Arn Anderson. Sid Vicious reacquainted himself with the promotion by flattening Van Hammer. Big Sid is now managed by Colonel Robert Parker. The Four Horsemen unit was brought back with a new flair, that being Ric Flair, Arn and Ole Anderson, and Paul Roma. Remember him with the World Wrestling Federation? They comprised the new unit, and Sting whipped the prisoner, formerly Nails in the WWF, who subbed for a departed Scott Norton. Among the 7,000 people witnessing the Slamboree show in the Omni, roughly half paid. In other WCW news, ring announcer Tony Gillum resigned this past week, and Shane Douglas, along with Tom Zink, received their pink slips from the company. By the way, in case you're wondering who teamed with Ricky Steamboat on last Sunday's show, under the mask was Tom Zink, not Douglas, as one of the hombres. Sticking with WCW, Jesse the Body Ventura, he missed his television duties in calling the Slamboree show last Sunday due to being hospitalized in Minnesota for blood clots in his leg. You may remember back in 1985, the Body experienced a blood clot in his lung while wrestling for the World Wrestling Federation. It's believed the clots are a result of Jesse's exposure to Agent Orange when he was in the service. Well, manager valet Tony Adams has returned to not only one but two promotions and under as many identities. In the USWA, Adams is Brian Christopher's manager now, called Nanny Simpson, a gift from his friend Johnny Polo. As the storyline goes, then in a Global Wrestling Federation, Tony has aligned herself with Iceman King Parsons. Although details are still sketchy at this time, the Wrestling Observer was reporting this week that USWA wrestler Jeff Jarrett and promoter Eddie Marlin were involved in a truck accident last weekend in Dixon, Tennessee. Reports have it that the two were riding in the truck with the ring in it at about 4 a.m. on Sunday, coming back from their Saturday night show in Jonesboro, Arkansas, with Marlin falling asleep at the wheel. Now, the ring and truck are said to be destroyed, and no conditions concerning Marlin were given, although there was good news that Jarrett initially was not too seriously injured. And Jarrett is Marlin's grandson. Well, catching up on the World Wrestling Federation news, at this past week's television tapings up in Canada, a midget wrestler was introduced as the Little Hulkster, and Mike Shaw, who you will remember last appearing as Friar Ferguson, that's been aced. Now he appeared as the Gargoyle. To the scrapbook files we go. 10 years ago this week in pro wrestling in 1983, it was a good one. In Tokyo, Japan, Hulk Hogan defeated Antonio Inoki to become the first ever international World Grand Prix champion. In Augusta, Georgia, there was a strange match. Larry Zbyszko and Killer Tim Brooks came out on the losing end to the team of Tommy Rich and pro boxer turned pro wrestler Ernie Shavers. And in Philadelphia, Sergeant Slaughter scored a win over Chief Jay Strongbow. For the Pro Wrestling Spotlight, I'm Don Laible reporting. Capsule time, 11:06.
Okay, Donny, and of course last week was Slamboree, and we talked earlier on the morning program, and you discussed that you really enjoyed the show, and we got a number of calls this morning. Very mixed response throughout the week from a lot of the fans. This was one of the shows where I guess it was a 50-50 split on whether you liked it or didn't like it. If you liked it a lot. If you didn't like it, you hated it. Your personal opinion of Slamboree last week?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think there was a nice flavor seeing some of the old-timers, although, as I said earlier, I thought it should have been either an old-timer show totally with just championship matches of the current wrestlers, or do it as a special show at a special time on TBS or whatever. I think they were trying to squeeze in too much in the amount of time that they had, but it was certainly good seeing the old-timers, and I think Davey Boy Smith put up a lot better match with Van Vader than I thought would. I also enjoyed the cage match for the Tag Team Championship. Thoroughly enjoyed the show.
Yeah, the thing that I didn't like about it was the fact that beginning you had all these legends there. You had 40 legends in the ring. Why not introduce these guys coming in?
That was the whole thing, too. These guys, when the show came on, they were starting to walk out of the ring. And if this was what you were building it up on, we should have seen those faces.
Well, they don't do their homework, that's for sure, and they just don't care about the details. What we're going to do now, Don, is I want to wish you a belated happy birthday.
Thank you.
Last week was your birthday, and the kid is not longer a kid anymore, right?
Well, I guess who you asked then.
I guess Sean Waltman is now the kid.
Yeah.
Did you see the interview with him, by the way, today?
Yes, I did. I enjoyed seeing him, and it's...
He looked good, didn't he?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's good. It's nice to see good things happen to good people. I remember him at the Weekend of Champions convention last summer, and very cordial, and to seem very appreciative of the attention he was getting, and it's good to see him get the push.
Okay, yeah. This certainly is. And Don, we'll speak to you again next week.
All righty, John.
Okay, take care.
It was his birthday.
Yeah, Donnie. It
no
was back then, man. He's just turned 64 last week, a couple weeks ago, whenever it was. May. Yeah. Happy birthday to Donnie. The kid is always the kid.
Yeah. So I was thinking about too. It's like it was the kid, like you said, he was just 34-ish. So that was when you determined he was maybe no longer the kid. That was Sean Waltman.
Yeah, right, exactly. But he's still the kid, and I always consider him the kid, even though we're just 2 years apart. But he always looked much younger than me. So Slamboree we were talking about, and I was at the time, I was kind of mixed emotions because they had this fan autograph deal, which they didn't do right. I mean, so they had fans that were able to meet these legends, and I thought that they were kind of mimicking what I did with Weekend of Champions. And but they had, several big name historic names there, like Luthez and Mr. Wrestling 2 and Vern Gagne and Eddie Graham and Ole Anderson, Ox Baker, Crusher, Moolah, Fabulous Moolah was there, Magnum TA, Bugsy McGraw, Dusty Rhodes, John Tolis, Mad Dog Vachon, Johnny Valentine. So it was quite the lineup, but it sounds as though they didn't really execute it properly, especially during the broadcast.
Yeah, and right after Donny, so we'll get into it a little bit more, you bring on someone who was there, a gentleman named Paul, and I could not even try to pronounce his last
Like
name.
the newsletter, some newsletter guy, right?
Yeah, from Wrestling World Examiner, and he was there, and he basically, you guys talked for about 4.5 minutes or so, all about the slam meet is what they called it. So we'll get a little bit more into that. But yeah, it sounds like on the show they just started it with them walking out of the ring, and you're getting really frustrated with these companies, quotes, not acknowledging the past and not teaching the fans about the legends who they are, so they would even appreciate it.
Yeah.
Which I thought was notable because we still hear that now about WWE.
Mm-hmm.
That was WCW at the time. I don't know. Is that something that's just you have seen happen more often than not? Like wrestling being a 365-day a year kind of a deal. Is there time for them to really go back and teach people? Is that why they just keep moving forward?
Well, it's impossible today, and it should have started back then for them to take a closer look and to revere the history of what came before them.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing about pro wrestling, where every other sport, I mean, the history is acknowledged, it's documented, there are lists, and in pro wrestling, there's not. It's speculation a lot of times. I mean, there are dates of who won titles, but the real history of the business is not ever been treated the right way in pro wrestling. To this day, it's not. If you wanted to start it like years ago, you could have. There's not even one unified Hall of Fame, for example, today. There's so many of them that are out there. And it's all politics, and it's just, it really is sad. That's why, in a way, I'm happy that a show like this can go back. Yeah. At least, when you hear a tape and you hear an episode from 30 years ago or even before then, this was what was going on that week. So this is a document of history, at least of what was going on 30 years ago.
Yeah, no, I mean, this has been a masterclass for me of getting in there. And because at the time I was around, I wasn't really watching wrestling. And even when I was in it, what I love, because we're going to get it at the end of the Herd interview, Child calls in and asks you the Undertaker's real name.
Mm-hmm.
And as I heard that, I remember thinking like, man, when I was that age, I guess there was no way I would have really believed the Undertaker was his birth name. But it never occurred to me to ask what their real name was. Like Razor was Razor. And then when they started calling him Scott Hall, I was kind of like, but that's Razor. Like I was so, I mean, the curtain was over my eyes completely.
Yeah. And it was also like, it was like wrestlers would go to different territories, use different names or different monikers. And always finding out somebody's real name was very, very cool. Even 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I used to discover, this is who that Mr. Wrestling is, or this is Mr. Wrestling 2, or, it was always, and this guy used this name in this territory, and he's using this name here. And when Johnny Rodz wrestled as this great enhancement guy here in the East, and he goes out to Los Angeles and he calls himself Java Week. I mean, it's like, why did that happen? And, so it was just kind of like, it doesn't happen in any other sport where you're all right, I'm going to go get traded to another team, and I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to be Mike Piazza anymore. I'm going to be, the pizza man, whatever,
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is what really has fascinated me about it. But, maybe it's just the nature of the business that it's all, it's been screwed up, and it's a work, and it's, built on deception, and it was never even considered to be something that people would really want. Would document history on, because it was just so it was and is still zany.
So in a way, as much as kayfabe protected the business for so long, would you say that in a sense kayfabe destroyed the history of it for so long because it was hard to?
Yeah, I would say that for sure.
Because they wouldn't allow the documentation to begin with. And like you said, you finding out who Johnny Rodz was important in case you came across an old program with a name you didn't recognize. You could piece together the puzzle But where's that going to go? Like you said,
Right.
there's no national library for
No.
you to go input that,
Yeah. I guess you try to go on Wikipedia, and that's the only thing you could do. I mean, to kind of find out about an individual, how many different names they used or whatever, as far as a source. But yeah, it's always befuddled me, and it's always it makes me sad in a lot of ways that there's really no concise history of the business.
I mean, and the business being as messy as it always been, it's not like we could just get 5 or 6 long time like you can't get like Cornette and Jim Ross and Bruce and Vince and Bischoff to all sit down and write a book.
And
you know
Heyman,
what I mean? Just up and Heyman, like just like
all these great historians.
Yeah, you can't just get them to make this massive one size encyclopedia. You know what I mean?
Well, WWE has certainly had their encyclopedias out. No, but I mean, it is what it is, right?
Well, they had one called the Encyclopedia, and when I opened it up, it was a picture book. I was like, what? So I couldn't upload.
Those things sell, though. I mean, especially at these conventions, the guys that are still alive. I mean, you see a lot of these books at all these conventions that people just want their pages signed by everybody they can get.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically a program.
Yeah, hardcover program.
Yeah. Yeah, because I remember I saw it at a Barnes & Noble or something. It was like the WWE Encyclopedia of the World Championship. And I was like, oh, it's a history of the whole thing. And as I flipped through it, I was like, this is a mess. Like, this isn't even a linear conversation.
I should actually try to bring on the guy that wrote some of these. He put it together. Brian Shields is his name.
Yeah.
Because I met him a few years ago, and really great guy. And he was big part of it. That would be an interesting topic to bring somebody like that on.
Yeah, that would be great. But yeah, I was just thinking about it because, like you said, they don't know who these old timers are, and I started thinking about, like, even with the WWE Network and Peacock, some of that stuff is up there, but it's not like it's highlighted or described in such a way that gives it historical context if you don't already have it.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy.
All right, let's get into Paul from the World Wrestling World Examiner, who was at the Slam meet.
Okay.
All righty, and what we're going to do now is we're going to talk to Paul Adamovic, and Paul was with the Wrestling World Examiner. Paul, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, got it right.
Okay, and how are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. How are you doing, John?
Okay, you do a publication called Wrestling World Examiner, and you also had a great annual, which I'm going to let you plug at the end of the segment here. But you were at Slamboree. You were one of the fans who traveled many, many miles to that event last week. And tell us a little bit about it and your experiences down there.
Okay, well, it was, why don't I start with the Slam meet?
Yes.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, just to see a lot of those guys and just to see them get back together. They called it Legends Reunion, and I think I heard you talking there about how they didn't capitalize on it. I think it was a great idea, and I think you're right, they didn't capitalize on it.
The attendance for that Slam meet, what would you give as far as an approximation?
I would say it was probably about 200 people.
Okay.
I don't think, I feel pretty secure in saying that probably every one of them went away happy.
But that is certainly the numbers. For example, we did an autograph session with Jake Roberts last week and one of our sponsors, and we did close to 400 people for that.
Yeah, and they have a national network to promote it.
They had 8 solid weeks of promoting the thing, and they draw less than 300 for it, which was really a shame.
Right.
But overall, did you go to they also had a dinner with the legends, which must have been a lot of fun for the fans that attended. And how many would you estimate were at that particular event?
Well, the dinner I did not attend. The dinner was sold out. There was about 100 people there. That's all it was set up for. It was in CNN Center, which is kind of like a mall. I don't know if you've been there.
No, I have not.
It was kind of like right in the middle of the mall, kind of like half in the hotel and half in the mall. The way they set it up is they had, I guess they had one legend at every table. So if they had about 20 tables with 5 people at each, plus one legend, that's how it worked. They didn't, I was expecting them to run something, maybe with the Horsemen or something with the couple of the legends to set up those tag matches. They did it on TV, but it didn't really look like they didn't involve any of the people that had paid their $25 to go there.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about the convention I thought was really great because everyone was very willing to sign autographs, and take photos with the fans, and just really cordial, really really nice. The only person I saw really give anybody any kind of attitude was Dusty, and I mean, he's professional, but he wasn't overly friendly about it.
Mm-hmm. No, it was an interesting event. Now, would you estimate that a lot of the fans there, I'm sure you mingled around, did they come from all parts of the country, or do you think it was a strong southern base that they drew from?
No, I was really surprised. They definitely came from all over. I recognized a lot of people from Jersey, from some of the shows down there, and a couple of people from up here, a couple of radio guys from Jersey.
So they couldn't, but they couldn't draw the locals to that particular
event? No, they really didn't. They had a lot of out-of-towners, and they had, I know a lady from Omaha asked me about getting her pictures from the show, and so they drew a lot from out of town, but there was no atmosphere down there at all. Really, there was no. They got good publicity. They got a full-page story on the sports section the day before the show, Saturday, with Rick Rude on the cover, talking about the event. But there wasn't any kind of buzz around town or anything like that.
Well, in the wrestling business, when you don't keep the fans informed or really talk about past history in pro wrestling, how can you expect to draw with a Legends convention?
Yeah.
Up here in New York, we've had our success stories with our Weekend of Champions. That's why it's just hard to fathom why the attendance for especially an autograph session draws about 200 people when it's promoted for several weeks, close to 8 weeks on nationwide television.
Right.
Well, we have Mr. Jim Hurd will be coming and joining us here. Paul, you do an excellent... Any final comments, first of all, as far as the weekend down there?
I thought, as far as the pay-per-view goes, I thought it was a lot better on TV.
Mm-hmm.
The Legends matches are a lot of missed moves. It didn't really show up on camera with the angles and everything.
And the crowd response down there, did it seem as dead live as it did on TV?
No, that's a point I would like to make, is that a lot of the people had a lot of respect for the Legends, and there was a lot of, trying to put it nicely, old-time fans there.
Yeah.
As far as demographics go, there's a lot of the older fans there, a lot of gray hair in the building.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I got a few myself. I tell you what, give us a plug for the Wrestling World Examiner, and of course the fine publication. Also the annual, the yearbook that you put out, which I've been meaning to bring you on previously, but plug away at it. I thoroughly recommend it to our listeners.
It's I'll give you the address. It's Post Office Box 303, Irvington, New York, and the zip is 10533-4303. And I just ask if the listeners want to make checks or money orders payable, if they can make them out to me, Paul, and I'll spell the last name. It's Adamovic.
And what does it cost for that annual?
The annual is $10, and the weekly newsletter is $5 for 4 issues.
Well, we appreciate you coming on the air with us.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, John. Thanks.
You take care and good luck to you.
Okay.
Do you remember him? Do you remember Paul?
No.
So this is likely one of the few times you talked to him?
Yeah, probably. I mean, when I heard the tape, name sounded vaguely familiar, but was happy to bring him on. I mean, I'm looking at that card, actually, and it was 10 matches on that Slamboree show. Huh. Too Cold Scorpio and Marcus Bagwell defeated Bobby Eaton and Chris Benoit. Wow. Sid Vicious with Robert Parker defeated Van Hammer, Dick Murdoch, Don Morocco, and Jimmy Snuka. Went to a no contest with Wahoo McDaniel, Blackjack Mulligan, and Jim Brunzell. These are historic names here. Thunderbolt Patterson and Brad Armstrong defeated Ivan Koloff and Baron von Raschke. Then Dory Funk Jr. with Gene Kiniski at his side took on Nick Bockwinkel. So it was Dory Funk Jr. with Kiniski versus Nick Bockwinkel with Vern Gagne. That was a draw. Rick Rude and Paul Orndorff defeated Dustin Rhodes and Kensuke Sasaki. Sting defeated The Prisoner, which I believe was Nails at the time.
Yeah. For
one of his few shots in there. And then Hollywood Blondes, Brian Pillman and Steve Austin defeated Dos Hombres. Do you know who Dos Hombres were?
No, you mentioned it in one of the earlier ones.
Yeah, it was Ricky Steamboat and Tom Zink.
Yeah,
Barry Windham defeated Arn Anderson, singles match for the NWA World Championship in the main event, as we talked about here. Davey Boy Smith defeated Big Van Vader by DQ for the WCW Heavyweight Championship. So really a pretty loaded show, and just disappointing numbers, though.
Well, yeah, and it sounds like that it came across flat on screen, but in the arena it was...
Yeah. Maybe that's why there was such a 50-50 split. Either you hated it or you loved it. And it could have been done a lot better looking back at it 30 years ago, especially with all those legends at that Slamfest autograph deal.
Yeah, and interesting when you think about how he said it came across better on TV.
Yeah.
But the audience seemed more interested in person.
Yeah.
Oh, weird. I guess.
Yeah, totally.
And also notable that you were just so vocally disappointed in them that they only drew 200 people to the Slam meet.
Yeah,
and you had 400 people at the Jake signing.
Yeah,
like Jake alone got me 400. You couldn't get 200 with all those people.
Yeah,
like you were mad at them.
Yeah, because that's like how much money must they have spent?
Yeah,
for all those guys. It's crazy.
Yeah, it was neat. It was weird. But yeah, I don't. We keep it moving. I don't have anything else on that.
Keep it moving, man.
Yeah. This is where you bring on Jim Herd. You were back to back on this one. You got to the callers halfway through Jim Herd because you had Donny ready to go, Paul was on the line, and Jim was already there. So you just kept moving down the line. I do start this Jim Herd interview with a commercial, and then we go through the beginning of the interview, and then we'll get caught up on the other side.
Okay.
The Real Wrestling Hotline, 1-900-903-9030. Fresh every day, every week. Hear Meltzer. That's right, Dave Meltzer. Plus Beverly, Terry Funk, Cornette, Dangerously, Arezzi. The Real Wrestling Hotline, 1-900-903-9030. Hear the wrestling horoscopes of the stars. Play tic-tac-toe hold. 10 new reports every week. The Real Wrestling Hotline, 1-900-903-9030. Cost 99 cents per minute. Children under 18 must have parents' permission.
Call 212-477-5610 and be part of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight. Now back to John Arezzi.
Okay, back with the program and kicking off a big promotion, a brand new 900 number. You heard the spot right here on the program. That is exciting news that we're breaking tonight on this show. It's the first time that a group has been assembled of this magnitude for a 900 number. We're going to bring on Mr. Jim Herd right now. Mr. Herd, are you with us?
Hi, John, and hello, wrestling fans. How are you? After a year of silence,
here you are.
I'm here. How are you, John? It's nice to talk to you again.
Yes, I haven't actually had you on a radio program, I believe, since '89.
It's been quite a while, yes.
And you had left WCW, and you've been involved, I guess, in several other projects. Of course, your background was vast in the television field, I believe, also.
Yeah, we've been busy, and I can't say with any truism that I haven't missed the wrestling group, because I have. But on the other hand, I haven't missed WCW. There's very few people that can say they've had 3 guys in my job in the last year and a half. So, I think it all speaks for itself. The real thing I'm proud of is we put together probably on this new wrestling hotline a group of guys who probably have more background and knowledge about wrestling than most of the people that are in the ring. And not only that, they're not inhibited by politically correct management who says you can only talk about this or that. This wrestling hotline is going to touch every facet of the game and every promotion group in the United States, and tell it with certainly not only truth but the excitement of behind the scenes. We're going to go from the boardroom to the locker room.
Well, that's the way it is. And when I was asked to participate in the project, I tell you, I had a 900 number, a premium line number overseas, which does very well, and also a 900 number here in the States. But to get involved in a situation where I'm going to read the lineup here, Mr. Herd, the folks that you assembled and Wayne Coulter assembled for this is just phenomenal. First of all, Lance Russell is involved. Now, he was running the WCW's 900 number.
That's right. Lance has decided to, for a variety of reasons, come over to us because, our our showcase is going to be very exciting for two reasons. One, we've got the nuts and bolts of the wrestling correspondents of the world involved. You, Meltzer, Beverly, Paul E., Terry Funk. I mean, the list is sensational. Not only that, they're not inhibited by management saying, well, you can't talk about this or that. We're going to talk about everything. And it's exciting to me because one of the things that happened at WCW, I had Beverly on, and I got a lot of heat from the wrestling community because they said, "Hey, this guy's going to talk about things we don't want to talk about." And I stayed with the course, and now Beverly's with us. You, Meltzer, Beverly are the backbone of the wrestling fans' ability to tune in to behind the scenes, and that's what we're going to do.
Right, and here's the lineup for the fans out there. And of course, this is also a very affordable 900 number. It's only 99 cents a minute. On Sundays, you have yours truly with a report. Also, option number 2, you have WWF highlights with Georgia and Macropolis from the Wrestling Chatterbox. On Mondays, there's Dave Meltzer, the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Also, Scott Hudson, who does WCW highlights. Tuesdays is the day for Steve Beverly. And also, you have Smoky Mountain Wrestling highlights with Dutch Mantell. Tuesday and Wednesday. Dave returns Wednesday for another segment. Thursdays, you have Jim Cornette and also John Clark of the Wrestling Flyer newsletter with some great inside interviews. Fridays, you got Dave Meltzer again with Terry Funk. And Saturdays, Steve Beverly and Paul E. Dangerously. Then there are other options. You have question and answers. And I think another thing that's going to be real exciting about this is during the big pay-per-views and clashes, there is an open forum like a wrestling roundtable where we all talk live to the fans, I believe. Can you explain that wrestling roundtable to us a little bit?
Well, at some point, and it's probably, I would imagine 3 months away, the fan will be able to cut in and ask questions about the show that just immediately finished.
That's
and
exciting.
We will have the experts there to say, here, thumbs up, thumbs down, we liked it, we didn't like it, here's the weak points, here's the strong points, and dissect it on the air, live, after those bouts. And I think that's going to be an exciting thing. We had those roundtables at WCW for a while on Monday evenings.
Yes.
And the fans really enjoyed participating in those.
Hey, that's exciting. I'm going to call today.
Yeah, call now. 99 cents a minute. I mean, there was a lot here because, so it's the Real Wrestling Hotline.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy lineup there. A couple of the names that I noticed were on there were Jim Cornette and Paul E. Dangerously, who I believe both left because of Jim Herd, WCW.
Yeah.
Well, Paul was mostly Bill Watts had the huge breakout, but
yeah,
they were not happy
Cornette,
with Jim.
Cornette was not a fan of Jim Herd's, that's for sure.
And he's still vocally not.
Yeah, still, obviously. But this was kind of an interesting thing. And to be quite honest with you, I had no recollection of any of this until I heard the tape. So it certainly wasn't something that I was raking the dollars in from. And I think Meltzer discusses it a little bit more on next week's show. But I would assume that that somebody like Dave, who had a prominent role in it, multiple days a week, I would believe he would probably be on some sort of guarantee, although I'm not sure. I don't know, I don't know for sure. But to get these names together and to put something like this together was pretty exciting at the time.
Yeah.
And to be associated with everybody that was on this venture was really cool. And Jim Herd was the happiest I'd ever heard him on this interview for some reason.
So peppy and saying he missed the wrestling business, and wasn't a huge criticism about him that he wasn't a wrestling guy.
Yeah, he was a Pizza Hut executive in the beginning, and that's how he got the gig. He was some type of marketing wizard with Pizza Hut, and then got involved with some friends who brought him over. I think he was friends with Turner, who brought him over to WCW back in '89. Yeah, but what a tumultuous run he had, and never thought he'd see the light of day back in the wrestling business. But here it is in 1993, and he's back in it with this 900 venture.
Yeah, and took the 900 number guy from WCW right out from underneath him.
Scott Hudson, and Lance Russell. I mean, Hall of Fame, some of these Hall of Fame names like Lance Russell and some of the others associated with it. And then you have even George Amacropoulos and John Clark, and it was
Steve Beverly.
Yeah.
Once you heard it,
how do you divvy the revenue up from that?
God, yeah, that's because did any of this spark your memory on how the business even worked, or if you were on a guarantee?
I remember, you have to, you call in your report and you record it, and that's it. And then you get your statements and whatever check you get. And I don't remember making a lot of money from it, if anything.
Yeah.
So I don't know who made out on the deal.
Yeah.
You even had to make a little money. And I didn't think it lasted that long either.
Yes. Yeah. Did that come up in your mind? Like, was it something you remember continuing to do?
No, I mean, that's why I'm like, I didn't even remember it until I heard the tape, and I'm like, shit. Yeah. Now I kind of remember it, but I certainly don't remember it, vividly. And I don't know how successful it was. That would be a good question for Meltzer.
Yeah, if Meltzer remembers that. I also think that it's so crazy the people who got into business with Jim Herd. He hadn't been around wrestling for a year, and suddenly he was rallying up the troops.
Yeah, he was a good marketing guy. I mean, he was. I mean, he was not he should have never been put in charge of creative for the organization, for WCW and the booking committees and everything else. But he was a businessman. He was a successful businessman, but he was, detested. And he was a guy who, he and I had some heat based on, well, initially when I brought Ricky Steamboat on in '89 to talk about the contract dispute, and Jim wanted to respond to that because that was kind of the first time ever in history that a wrestler went on a public radio show to talk about a contract dispute, and then Herd came on to address it. And then when I had the problems with Sting at the 1990 Wrestling Fans Convention, that was another point of contention where in the sheets, I think Herd called me a leech.
Yeah.
For the convention and what I was trying to make money off of wrestling. And so there was heat there, and it surprised me when I got contacted, even though I don't remember at this point when it happened, that I was included in this venture. But I guess with the power of New York radio and reaching 7 states on WEVD, then maybe they thought I had a value to it.
Well, he would have had to have known you had not only a reach but a value, because you annoyed the hell out of him while he was in charge of WCW.
Mm-hmm.
Who else was doing that in radio? You know what I mean?
Nobody.
And who else was doing that in radio who wasn't already backstage at some of the stuff? You know what I mean? Like, all the other radio shows were wrestlers and personalities.
Yeah, there were other radio shows out. Like Wade Keller had started a show at this point. Mike Tenay had the Wrestling Insiders. So there were other shows out there. But I was the guy in the New York City market.
Yeah.
I was the guy in the media capital of the world. I had reach of 7 states, and I was I kind of had that reputation as somebody who just went for it and didn't give a shit. Just was going to report on everything that was going on in the inside of the business. And it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, but the fans appreciated it, and I got guests. So,
yeah, I mean, because if this dude was on top of WCW and you're annoying him because the wrestlers are reaching out to you to talk about something on your show, then that already illustrates to somebody who's never heard of you immediately, wait a second, this is somebody.
Yeah, I gave them a megaphone, which they never had before.
Yeah, so cool. It's crazy. Yeah, I just had to imagine there was no way you called Jim Herd to say, hey, do you want to put together a hotline? Like, he would have had to reach out to you.
No, I didn't.
I wonder what he did after WCW. If a year later he's trying to get a hotline going. We can keep moving on it. But yeah, I was blown away. Jim Cornette and Jim Herd in business together.
Mm-hmm.
Especially given all of the stuff that Cornette said on your show about Jim Herd. And then all of a sudden he's all like, hey guys, I'm back and we're in business. And now look who I got. And I was like,
it would be fascinating to hear some of those tapes of some of those hotline reports in real time today. But of course, they're not existent. But hey, let's call the number and see what happens.
Yeah, it's got to still be there.
Imagine.
All right. So this is when you actually catch up with Jim a little bit about what went wrong at WCW, which I thought was interesting too, because I wouldn't say you changed your tone a lot, but you definitely were in business with a guy who you used to not like. And so
yeah. I guess it was a little hypocritical, if that's what you're trying to say, Marsh.
No, I'm saying your tone.
Was I tough on him or no?
No, you became pretty forgiving.
I did.
Yeah. But also there's hindsight and there's what is the state of WCW at. And plus you're already hot about Slamboree. So there's more than one reason.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you sold out.
Well, in order to sell out, you got to make money, right?
That's right. So this is the second part of the Jim Herd interview.
Okay.
And I tell you, Mr. Herd, it's been a long time that we've spoken, at least on the airwaves. And I tell you one thing: you had a lot of critics in your reign as the head honcho there at WCW, myself included.
Sure.
But I tell you one thing: looking back at your reign, it seems like the good old days. It really does.
Let's look at it this way. In fact, I refer to the management there as philo dough management. It's layer after layer after layer, and it's very, very difficult to pinpoint responsibilities and all. I'm going to have a series of interviews with you and John Clark on the hotline, and we'll get into some of the things that I believe have been done badly. God knows that my critics pointed out a lot of things that I was a little bit off base on, but I know one thing: the ratings were higher, the pay-per-views were more successful, and the overall picture when I was there was much greater.
Well, the talent base was stronger also.
The talent base was compared to, the lineup, of course, is in a revolving wheel now, and I don't find that not exciting. I think one of the things in the future, although it'll never happen, is that at some point a pay-per-view between all the factions, rather than a flab fest like they just had, would be a sensational draw. I don't say that in disrespect to the Johnny Valentines. Lou Thez is a very dear friend of mine, and so's Muchnick and all, but when you've got Blackjack and Wahoo wrestling, don't talk to me about exposing the business. I mean, this is serious stuff now, and I think whoever recommended the show to Bill Shaw was wrong, and I think the group that okayed it is wrong, and that's the way things go. And I will go into that further on the hotline when you and John Clark interview me in the future.
Okay. Let me ask you one question though. When you were at when you were the head honcho there, okay, what was the most difficult thing that you had to put up with or deal with? What was the most difficult thing running that company?
Oh, I think the worst part of it was that when I went there, I was promised a supporting cast of CNN and TV. I mean, not only TBS but TNT, and a four-pronged approach to making it successful, which never really happened. And although Ted Turner, who is a great friend and a great fan of wrestling, when I went to him and said, "Look, the support that I'm getting is less than number one I was promised, and number two, CNN's interviewing Hulk Hogan rather than my stars." And he said, "Hey, you have to earn that." And although I respected his judgment on that, I still felt that if all of the powerful components of Turner Broadcasting were lined up behind WCW, that we would have been much more successful than we were, and that's much more successful than they are now.
Mm-hmm. That was kind of cool to hear too, the idea, because I recall you giving WCW grief for having Hogan on at the time too, not even from the Herd perspective, but you're like, why is he? This is Turner and WCW struggling. Why are they promoting WWF? Like,
Didn't make sense, buddy.
Yeah. And that was something that was definitely out of his control,
Yeah.
Promised a lot.
Totally. Fascinating stuff to listen back to today. It really was. And it sounded like Jim had a few cocktails.
He was peppy.
Very peppy. Happy and peppy and bursting with love.
There is part of him that had to love every bit of criticism about WCW after he left.
Yeah. I mean, to his credit, though, I mean, there was a better talent pool. I mean, you had that wonderful era, especially in 1989 was, aside from some of the things that were just so ridiculous that he implemented, but you had Flair, you had Funk in that amazing feud, you had the Great Muta, you had the Skyscrapers debut, and you had the Steiner brothers, you had an incredible Sting. I mean, you had an incredible array of talent. It was the hottest. It was the best year, I think, of WCW in regard to creative. Was in 89 and early 90. I mean, that Steamboat, I mean, it was just freaking incredible, and Steamboat leaves, of course, in the middle of 89. But it was a good run. That was an exciting year for WCW, and Jim Herd was, the executive in charge.
Yeah. Yeah. You even mentioned it in the interview that by far 89 was your favorite year of WCW to date. That it still hasn't been as good.
It still is.
Yeah. Which is remarkable because when you listen back to your tapes, you were just ragging on it. The things you loved, you thought were incredible, but the things you hated, you thought like, get Jim Herm out of there.
It was so crazy that you could have this incredible summer of 89. You have this incredible momentum, and so many people excited about it. But there were so many things that were not done right, from promoting live shows to with the power of TBS and Turner not elevating the performers into mainstream the way they could have. They were not Vince McMahon's. McMahon, the marketing genius that he always has been. It was there were a lot of missteps, and then of course too many cooks spoil the broth in the booking committees and political agendas, and so it was a good little run there. But when it turned sour, and it was pretty bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing that Jim Herd and anyone who took over didn't have to deal, or that had to deal with that Vince didn't, is Vince didn't have a Turner to go to and didn't have anyone else above him, because Turner also had someone he had to check in with, being the public company that he was. Like,
but he could have done a lot more if they would have pushed Turner harder, and he did. He pulled he gave Eric Bischoff the checkbook, and he wanted to go at them, which started the Monday Night Wars, and that's when Turner really said, you know what, we're going after him in a big way, and they did, and 83 weeks and all of that,
yeah,
signing up every big name, incredible star, and it was. That was an exciting era too, but that's when Turner was like, screw it, I'm just going to spend, and I'm going to let Bischoff do what he wants. And an enormous amount of money was spent, but they also were number one in the ratings for 83 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people don't talk highly of it, but I remember as a kid, I loved it when they took over Jay Leno's show. Like, it was terrible, but I loved it.
Yeah.
Like, so, that was a big deal.
It was a big deal. It was a big deal when Scott Hall invaded and Kevin Nash follows and Hulk Hogan turns heel. And it was an incredible run. But, for me, purely as a old school wrestling dude, seeing Terry Funk turn on Ric Flair, pile driving him through a table, and then, Flair going out with a neck injury, and then their series of matches, Great American Bash 89 leading up to New York Knockouts with the I Quit match. That was just incredible stuff.
Yeah.
Off the chart incredible.
Yeah. Really cool. Yeah. I got one more clip. Oh, wait. Was it the second?
Please tell me that this is about a tag team that Herd put together.
I've got two more clips.
Okay. Because we got to talk about that.
It's in there. It is in there. because there's a few in that final clip for Jim Herd. This next one is you kind of ask him immediately about rumors swirling at the time about a Time Warner merger.
Mm-hmm. And let me ask you this. There's been a lot of rumors over the last several weeks about the situation with possibly Time Warner buying Turner Entertainment and maybe the wrestling company going away if that happens. What is your prognosis?
My prognosis is Ted Turner is not going to sell to any of those guys. He wants to own it all himself, and I think he will at some point if all the money crunchers can get together and look at it from a position that he's not going to sell TNT to anyone. I mean that all those movies will only be like Picasso's. They'll be more valuable in the future. They're not making any more. They're not likely to make any more. And TNT's a brilliant idea from a visionary who I think he's a true visionary. I don't think there's any possibility of him selling it out.
Well, there's always everyone that we talk to, the fans, always say, well, why don't he take a more hands-on approach with that? Do you think he'll ever pull the plug on the wrestling company?
No, I don't think he will. I think there's changes in the offing. I think it'd be crazy to stay the status quo, but I don't think he'll pull it. I think I think number one, it did him in good stead over the years. He likes wrestling fans. And he likes wrestling as a ratings success on TBS. Let's face it, not particularly now, but when we were there, we had higher ratings than any other program on TBS, and I think that's fully possible. I mean, people talk to me about wrestling being a down era, or a down time. Wrestling television never takes dips. Maybe in the arenas, people kind of get disenchanted and don't go as much, and economics have something to do with that, but it doesn't have to do with television. Television ratings have never took dips based on arena attendance. It's foolish to look at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
You give them what they want to see on television, and they will tune it in.
And it's been a difficult time for the business right now. The arena shows are way down.
Interesting. There were rumors circulating in '93 about a merger, and they came to fruition actually 3 years later, a little more than 3 years later. October 10th, 1996, Turner merged with Time Warner at that time, and it was a merger, and it made Turner $7.5 billion.
They gave him the money to spend.
Yeah, and then eventually, January 10th, 2000 was when AOL and Time Warner merged, and then, wrestling was going to be toast after that, shortly after that. But yeah, at the time, it was funny that there were rumors already about a potential merger.
Yeah. And then when you think about it, too, everything Jim Herd said was pretty correct. Turner never did want to get rid of wrestling. No. He never did want to sell for anyone who would get rid of the wrestling. AOL came in after Turner and cut it.
Yeah, I mean, wrestling was a mainstay. When you had the Superstation, when he only had was the TBS, and it was on Channel 27, I believe, on cable in New York, and that was it was built on wrestling on Saturday nights at 6:05, and the Atlanta Braves, which became America's team back then. So that's what built it. And he had a loyalty. He had a loyalty for pro wrestling. Turner did.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't until he was out that they cut it. So yeah, he was right about that. The other thing I thought was interesting is he said that television's never down. Arena attendance is down. And I think if you really big picture it, he's still right. Because yes, the ratings right now are lower than they've ever been. But that's from the disbursement of cable television.
Yeah, that's because there's so many options, and that's why, even getting 1 million people to watch a wrestling show is still considered a success, because there's just so much out there. You can get your content anywhere. You could stream it. You could, DVR it. There's just and so many options. I mean, there are thousands of channels out there.
And there's hundreds of ways to watch that wrestling, and not just that one way anymore.
You could
So you
watch
can watch
clips
this
on Twitter. You could go to YouTube. You could go anywhere, and you could get your wrestling fix 24/7 in whatever platform you want to see it. It's there
exactly.
instantly for you.
There's still a lot of argument to be made that WWE's still got the same 10 million numbers coming in if you look at like their YouTube views and stuff. Some of their clips, like the last Bloodline clip that came out, had like 18 million views or something.
Amazing.
You know? And it can't be bots. I mean, I guess it could be. I don't know. But there's an argument to be made that just because the Nielsen ratings are showing what they're showing, that their viewership really hasn't shifted. You know what I mean? And you look at them selling out the stadiums the way they do 2 nights, and AEW too. People talk about their attendance being down right now, and they're showing pictures of arenas half full and all that, but their ratings are consistent. They're getting that 800 plus every time and more on YouTube, you know?
They are. And they have that big advance for Wembley.
Yeah. Huge Wembley advance.
It's going to be a huge show. And then the new show, that's the Saturday night show with the CM Punk returning and the other stuff. I haven't really watched AEW in the last several weeks. I know the new show is debuting. By the time people hear this, it'll have already aired. I am going to watch that. I want to see what that direction is going to be for that show.
It looks like, yeah.
But I might be one and done when I watch that anyway.
Right. And if you want to see more of it, you don't have to tune in live each week. You can go check out a clip on Twitter, on YouTube. And that's what I mean. Like what Jim said still seems to be true.
Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting to hear all these years later.
Yeah. Because I think also a lot of people really go, oh, less people watch wrestling now than ever before because of the Nielsen rating. But it's like all the other ways, there's indications that
would it be cool to combine it like on every platform to see how many people are actually getting how many impressions there actually are of a broadcast or a match? I mean, between your YouTube, your Twitter, your Instagram, your TV, the DVR. I mean, so they're still out there. It's still, it's not going away. And it wasn't going away 30 years ago.
Right. I mean, there's a caller who asked about that specifically in a minute, but I mean, I think about even like anecdotal evidence. When I was a kid obsessed with wrestling, I don't think I ever met another wrestling fan. Nowadays, I run into wrestling fans almost every time I leave the house.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Right? I see shirts. I see stuff. Like people talk about whatever shirt I'm wearing. Oh, hey, like happens all the time now. So I'm like, I don't know. To me, Jim Hurd's pretty smart. I'm a Jim Hurd guy now.
There you go. What a revelation. And you can hear this entire episode on patreon.com/John Arezzi, the entire unedited interview with Jim Hurd. This might be something this would be really fascinating, Marsh, to kind of edit or kind of take that entire interview and put it up on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should.
Because that would be, it would probably get a lot of views and people would be kind of fascinated by it.
Yeah, the fact that it happened. Hey, did you know Jim Cornette and Jim Hurd were in business?
Yeah, that could be your clickbait.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bummer because I do really want to know if Jim Cornette even remembers that.
Yeah.
Like you know? And I'm sure he did it for money. But like,
yeah, why do people do anything?
Yeah. So James from Lindenhurst does call in. He says WCW's problem is they always blame the guy in charge and they never blame anybody below the number one guy, like the workers or booking committees or anything like that.
Good point.
Yeah. And he's like, so no matter who's in charge, anything that's wrong, it's their fault. Jim Hurd does say that he had issues with Flair, but he does think that Flair's a single reason wrestling's still even surviving in that part of the country.
Mm-hmm.
And he also says that he thinks one of the bigger issues right now is nepotism. And with them bringing in Ole Anderson, he said, don't be surprised if you see Ole's kids start showing up on TV more regularly, too. And even went on to say that Dustin Rhodes coming on because of Dusty. He goes, people could tell. And he goes, that's not to say that Dustin isn't talented. He goes, he is. He goes, and also still one of the nicest guys in the business. And you both were like just going how great Dustin was, but that the fans were likely giving some kickback because it looked like nepotism.
Right. That's what hurt Dustin early on.
Yeah.
People don't like anything shoved down their throats.
Right.
Like even modern day, if you look at Roman Reigns, the fans hated him because they felt he was forced down their throats in the beginning.
Yeah.
He was just off topic for a second before we get back to it. Have you heard that podcast that Paul Heyman did with Rick Rubin?
I did not. I keep hearing about it, which tells me that there's something in there.
Freaking amazing.
Yeah.
It's freaking amazing. And I have never heard a podcast with Paul. I haven't heard any, really, if you look at it. I mean, but this is a sit down. It was done after WrestleMania, and it was 2.5 hours or whatever it was, close to 3 hours of Paul Heyman at his best with inside stories and the Brock Lesnar's, the Roman Reigns, and they discussed Roman Reigns being pushed down everybody's throat. And I mean, it's like you got to hear it. Just, do a search for Rick Rubin, Paul Heyman, and the actual name. It's a pretty odd name of a podcast. And sorry I digress, but I think anybody listening to this, it is called Tetragrammaton. Tetragrammaton with Rick Rubin. And the interview is just incredible. And even the way the commercials were pretty cool. But the Paulie stuff on there, in comparison to what he did on my show years ago, it is a total of 2 hours and 9 minutes. And it was amazing. You got to hear it.
Yeah.
Sorry about the digression.
No, I mean, I'm glad that you did hear it. I mean, we've talked about your guys' relationship in the past, but like knowing that it's that good, that you felt that strongly about it, even.
Well, hearing his history and hearing, even the story of his family and his mother being a Holocaust survivor and just the stuff that I had no idea about Paul and his kids and it just his relationship with Vince McMahon. Freaking incredible. I mean, really, really is. And I've listened to it and I'm listening to it again because it was so fascinating.
Yeah. I've heard about it ever since it's come out. Almost every day I've seen somebody mention it. And I'm like, okay, I've got to.
And I've always been a fan of Rick Rubin's. Rick Rubin is just incredible producer and everything he's done in the music business.
Yeah. I saw a spotlight thing on him. Last month when I was staying at my grandma's, we watched a whole little thing. It was like a Dateline or something. And it was like a half hour about him. He was fascinating.
Yeah. Did you see the thing he did with Paul McCartney?
Oh,
that was incredible. When in the studio where they were actually mixing the tracks and, taking, just letting Paul listen to, they gave him the master tapes where he was able to isolate vocals and that was friggin' amazing. That streams out there too. I mean, it's just like, anyway, sorry about that, but it was like, my goodness. I mean, just hearing that and I think people will love it.
Do you think Rick and Paul were just friends for a while?
Yeah. Yeah.
That wouldn't shock me.
No.
Paul seems to know everybody.
He did. Always did.
So you do get a bunch of callers with Jim, though. I kind of think I forgot to mention that when we were talking about the callers coming in. Billy asks how much wrestlers make per match, which I thought was interesting. And you guys basically said anywhere from $25 to $1,000, and a lot of them are on salary. And and almost every single fan called in and said, "Hey, in hindsight, WCW was better when you were running it." I'm like, pretty cool. Joe even asked him directly about the Paramount show. He says he doesn't know very much about it, but he did not hear good things. Rob from Staten Island said WCW had more class when Jim Herd was running it. And I thought that was an interesting way of putting it. I didn't think that this era it was getting raunchy.
No. Yeah, that's an interesting comment from that caller.
Yeah. They also asked, do you think the pay-per-view model is passé? Which I thought was great. Like, should we move on from the pay-per-view model? This is 93 before they make the most money they've ever made on pay-per-views. And he says that they're not. He's just saying they're just not good. He's like, it's not that the model's bad. It's the way that they're utilizing it is bad. And they need to get back on track and get that wrestling and boxing are always going to be the most successful things on pay-per-view. I mean,
true.
He didn't know MMA was going to come around, but that's still fighting.
No, I mean, pay-per-view has been built on wrestling, boxing, and MMA.
Yep. This is the last clip we have of Jim Herd. It is Tracy who called about the Undertaker's real name, and it leads on to a question that you have for him. And then briefly after, you talk about the 900 number for a quick minute, and that's all right here.
Okay.
Okay, let's take our last call there. I thought he would be for Mr. Herd, but we'll go to Tracy from Weehawken, New Jersey.
Hi, John.
Hi, Tracy.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
Okay, I am like a real major fan of The Undertaker.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you know his real name.
Mark Calloway.
Mark Calloway?
Yes. Mr. Herd, he was with...
Yeah, he was with the WCW.
Yeah, when you was under your regime, was he there? Under me,
yeah,
Mark?
sure he was.
Yeah.
We couldn't figure out what to do with him, and he was legitimately 6'9", and the guys, just to give you a little background, the guy said, well, I didn't have any facial expression, so we weren't smart enough to do anything with it, so Titan Sports, well, if he doesn't have any facial expression, let's make him the Undertaker.
There you go. There's the story, Tracy, okay?
Listen, John, I've got to run.
Okay.
I appreciate the time on the air. I hope the fans will tune into the Real Wrestling Hotline, which is 1-900-903-9030. And believe me, we've put together, along with your talent and Meltzer and Beverly, this 900 line is a benefit when you call it, and I appreciate the time.
Well, thank you, Jim, and good luck to you, and we'll be talking to you soon.
You sure will.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Jim Herd, and you know, I forgot to ask him. I had it written down. I wanted to ask him. Are you there still?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you one question, okay?
Uh-huh.
Out of all the time you were at WCW, NWA, was it actually your idea to do the ding-dongs?
That's right. It was, and of course...
A classic tag team now. That's like a historic classic tag team. You got to realize that,
but
right?
let me explain one thing.
Okay.
And the ding-dongs were never done exactly as they were to be done.
Uh-huh.
The original idea of the ding-dongs was to have a huge bell that was rested on one of the ring corners. And the bell not only was for them to go over, and they had a plate under their mask on their forehead to go hit their head on the bell. But it was also something that their opponents could use their head for, too. But the bell was supposed to be a big chime. I mean, it didn't just, and so we ended up with little bitty bells, and it kind of got sabotaged along the way. But you're right, it's being remembered. I'll be labeled with that forever.
That's right. Well, listen, you have a good weekend.
Thanks, John.
Take care.
Good talking to you.
Okay, bye-bye. Okay, Mr. Jim Herd, how to get that ding-dong question in one of the classic tag teams of wrestling, even though they only lasted a couple shows. I tell you what, now for this, the 900 thing, which tomorrow, now I've alluded to a lot of things here on the radio, and I really don't have enough time to talk about them. For example, we've organized and put together an international tour of Southeast Asia. Now, I have not talked about it here on the air. Also, a couple other things, a relationship that I had with Mr. Jim Hellwig, the man formerly known as the Ultimate Warrior, who was supposed to be our headliner for the Southeast Asia tour, which we're leaving at the end of June. If you call the 900 number tomorrow, it's 99 cents a minute. I'm giving you the scoop on that deal. I don't have enough time to do it here on this program. I'm going to be taking your calls. So if you call the 900 number tomorrow at 900-903-9030, you hear the whole scoop, where we're going to Southeast Asia, what wrestlers we're bringing, and a lot of other great inside information. That is all day tomorrow. That's my day on the hotline, the Real Wrestling Hotline, and that's 900-903-9030, 99 cents a minute. Kids, get your parents' permission, and I hope you really enjoy what these guys are going to do, because we have a great lineup, and it's the first time a lineup of this magnitude has been assembled.
Well, that was pretty shitty of me not to kind of talk about the tour and put it on the 900 number. But we do talk about it the following week, though, next week.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think you were just trying to get people the lead on getting you
get that first Sunday off the ground with some good callers to find out about the inside scoop of the International Wrestling All-Stars Tour. Yeah, exactly. But going back to the ding-dongs, that still sounded like a pretty shitty idea, even though he tried to... what was he saying? There was a bell in the corner? I didn't even...
a giant bell.
A giant bell. So what did that mean? And meanwhile, you had...
It was sabotaged by having too little of bells.
The bells were... Did you ever see the ding-dongs? Did you ever see them? I mean, rolling around the ring, and the bells would be falling off to It was just kind of one of the most ridiculous, and I think one worst promotional gimmick of the year in 1989 anyway.
The way that he was like, oh, it was sabotage because they had little bells. It was supposed to be a big one. So I guess what it did sound like was they're going to have a metal plate in their head so they could ring the bell.
Which rings the bell.
Yeah.
And what does that signify?
Nothing. That's
Donny,
the part
was here today to ask.
Because that was my thought too. Was I was like, wait a second. At first, when he goes, "Oh, there's supposed to be a big bell in the corner," and I was like, "Oh, they would ring the bell and distract the opponents, thinking that the match was over when it wasn't." Like that was my thought. And then he's like, "No, they're gonna headbutt it," and I was like, "Wait, what?"
Still a stupid idea.
Yeah. It was amazing. It was, and he's right. He's still today remembered about the ding dongs.
Mm-hmm.
I still hear ding dongs brought up from time to time and going, "Oh, Jim Herd, he came up with the ding dongs."
His name is synonymous with the ding dongs.
It's amazing. If only they had a giant bell.
If only.
Also, really cool little Undertaker story. In the booking committee, they said they didn't know what to do with him because he had no facial expressions. Thought that was great. Although I don't think that's why they gave him the Undertaker. But it's probably why it worked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Initially.
I mean, he it was a special talent even back then when I first saw him. He was just but it was kind of like lack of personality.
Yeah.
And he goes over to Titan and there you go. The legend is born.
Amazing. Yeah. Because even then, like when you're really thinking about no facial expression, a lot of times the no facial expression just means the no sell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not selling anything. So if he was a beast that's not supposed to sell anything, then it becomes amazing.
Mm-hmm.
If only Undertaker had a big bell.
Only.
You talk about the bus trip, getting ready to go to Philadelphia for ECW the next week, and you said that there's going to be a party at the arena after the show with all the wrestlers. That's not familiar?
What kind of party would that be?
Yeah, I was
that crew.
Interesting. Now, this is before Paul was running the whole thing, but this was like still a pretty crazy group.
I wonder if Mike Memphis was there doing Elvis.
Ooh.
And the reason I bring Mike Memphis up, you know why?
Yeah.
Because he and Paul Lee get into it on next week's show.
He's coming back.
Yeah, explosive, crazy.
Let's see. I've got 3 more clips. 2 of them are callers. One of them is Howard from New Jersey, who wants to talk about the Legends reunion for a second again.
Yeah.
And ask you about the wrestling business, which you were kind of talking about before.
We're going to go back to the phones right now. The number to call here is 212-477-5610. Let's go to Howard from North Arlington, New Jersey. And Howard, I have not spoke to you in a couple of years, I don't think.
Well, it's been a while because I can't get through on the line. Things, I guess, are going well. The line's busy.
Yes.
But 2 quick things, John. One, regarding the Legends reunion. For a fan like myself who's been watching wrestling for 30 years, it was a fabulous thing. I enjoy seeing the Legends. But from a realistic standpoint, in today's market, when you bring those people back to a city like Atlanta, and the market that you have today for wrestling, quite honestly, being a younger market, how much significance do you think that has? I mean, bringing back people who were great 20 years ago, but the people who are sitting in the audience are 24 and 25 years old.
Well, it's like you don't know them, okay? Because the wrestling promoters have never acknowledged the past.
Right.
That's their fault. For example, in baseball, everybody knows, when you're a little youngster growing up, you know who Babe Ruth was or Mickey Mantle. Who the hell knows Mr. Wrestling 2?
Well, exactly.
And the guy did have a strong run down there, but they didn't do that. They tried to push something. They were hoping that they would attract older fans, and the older fans just aren't watching.
Yeah, I mean, from an economic standpoint today, the way I see the business, you sell merchandise to younger people. You sell a lot of the way the business is marketed to younger people. I mean, I don't think it's an accident that you have more wrestlers today with face paint than you had 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
A big thing then was a mask. But, today you have people with face paint, and today you have people come out with music. You never had anybody come out with music 10, 15 years ago. Now, the other point was the show at the Paramount. I attended it, okay. I've heard since that there was this wrong and that wrong. Now, first question, did Ric Flair make the decision not to come?
No, that was a legit problem with the airplane. They had to turn back to the Charlotte airport. However, they should have had the smarts. If this guy is going to be the headliner of the show, the Flair for the Gold segment, they should have had this guy in a couple of days before doing local interviews. He's Ric Flair. Bring him in 3 days. Bring him in a week before. He's not on the road. He's not wrestling. No, bring him in.
Yeah.
That was a stupid decision,
Now, the other thing, and then I'll...
Yeah, quickly, because we got a lot of calls.
Okay. Today, the way you see the business, okay, is it just a temporary downturn, or is wrestling about to go the way of roller derby?
No, wrestling's never going to go the way of roller derby. Matter of fact, this promotion's springing up now. There'll be a lot more springing up. You got Crockett coming back in. McMahon is now, beginning in July, regionalizing himself, it looks that way. He's going to be promoting in high schools again.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to come back to the business. I think it's just a matter of re-educating the fans and making the fans give wrestling another shot. I don't think it's dead at all. But Howard, we got to run.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thanks for your call.
You only had 2 more callers, so I don't know why you told me you had so many. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I liked Howard. Howard was a mainstay in the early days of the show, and I hadn't heard from him in a while. And he always had intelligent questions, and he always made good points.
Yeah. He came across real smart, like he was just trying to get a hold of you to ask you, especially about that Flair thing. It seemed like you'd been weighing on him a little bit.
Yeah, I was happy to hear from him. I was like, he was one of my favorite callers back then.
I guess it was a good problem. He said that you haven't heard because he hasn't been able to get through, which means he's tried a few times. Probably not every week, but he's tried a couple times. So that's cool.
I hope he doesn't try calling in next week.
Yeah, next week's not going to be a good time to call.
I don't know how many people that get were pissed off, but I know everybody who tried to call the show in next week gets pissed off. Everyone.
Yeah, no one walked away happy. Also neat about the whole roller derby thing. Also, funnily enough, in my town, roller derby is back. We have a roller derby league.
No kidding.
Yeah. I was like, all right.
I actually went to a roller derby show at a big event at Shea Stadium.
Wow.
Years and years ago. I used to watch roller derby all the time. The Thunderbirds.
Yeah?
Yeah. I loved roller derby years ago.
Yeah. And in there, too, you brought the whole Major League Baseball thing back, too. Like, they don't teach you who everybody is. But like we said, kayfabe kind of...
it's kind of ironic you bring that up again. I just got an email. I'm on these email list, of course, and it's Taste of Country. And it's like, the headline is 60 real names of country music's biggest stars.
I wonder if you've heard of any.
I've heard of all of them.
Yeah. Ken from Brooklyn calls and says, "Who's the greatest wrestler of all time?" And you kind of you initially say maybe Flair, but for you it's Blassie. Yeah, I love that.
It's funny. I was just listening to one of my college shows, which he talked about offline too. We're thinking of doing like a kind of a college reunion show with 2 friends of mine from 50 years ago, and one of the callers from the college show was like, "Who's your favorite wrestler?" And I said, Donny Laible Jonathan. It was from a show from 1976.
What? Wow. When do you think the shift happened? Do you remember the day that you saw Freddie Blassie and that was it?
Oh, Blassie was my favorite, but at the time, I guess at that current time, I was a big fan of Donny Laible Jonathan. I always thought he should be world champion, and he was just extraordinary in the ring. So that surprised me when I heard that. It was right before we started taping. I was listening to some of these college shows, and I'm trying to pull some, clips and figure out what we're going to do with this thing. And it's like, who's your favorite wrestler? And it's like, Donny Laible Jonathan.
I wonder if you're just trying to put him over to get more people supporting him.
No, I actually felt that. I just felt that he was one of these guys that didn't get his due, and he should have been a world champion. And I loved everything he did in the ring for such a big man. He was incredible. That's cool. But that's coming down the road. That may be a Patreon exclusive, because I think the hardcore fans will get a kick out of what I was talking about 50 years ago with a bunch of crazy college kids.
Your college years are pretty fun to me. Yeah, listening to some of those old ones that you posted back in the day, it's pretty cool. This is our last caller, but not our last clip. This is Mike from College Point.
Mike Johnson.
Calls here. We're going to go to Mike from College Point. Mike, you're next.
Hey, John.
How you doing?
Nothing for nothing, but Jim Herd, I don't know who the hell he's trying to work. He's complaining about the way WCW is, but nothing for nothing. When he was in charge, he made it that way. He ran Flair out. He ran Cornette out. He ran half the guys that made the company great in '89 to Vince or into obscurity for years. And now he's going to complain about it? That's a lot of bull. Because if he had spent the time to know what the hell he was doing in the first place, there wouldn't be these problems today. And now
I don't know if it wouldn't be the problems today, because you're dealing with a lot of the personalities there who have their own agendas. Herd did a lot of things wrong, and he did some things right as well in there. He wasn't 100% wrong, and he wasn't 100% right in that situation. What I think WCW needed, and I think what NWA needed, was not booking committees. I think they needed one executive in charge of marketing the deal, and they needed one person to handle the angles, the bookings with the wrestlers. And those two people needed to work hand in hand. There were too many cooks, and that spoiled the broth.
Okay, and my only question is Scott Norton out of WCW?
Yes, he quit.
And is Nails in?
Nails is not in. It was a one-shot deal.
Okay, thanks, John.
Okay?
Insightful young man that Mike Johnson was.
He was on to something. If he sticks with it, I think he'll have a future in this.
Yeah, he actually just scored an interview with Nails, actually, that I read online. A sit-down. He flew to Minneapolis to tape that.
Yeah, I was going to say it was really timely to hear this. He's asking about Nails. Nails just reemerges.
Yeah.
And that was the one that you couldn't get. Remember, you tried to have Nails on like 3 weeks in a row.
Tried to get him. Couldn't get him. Now, we're 30 years later, Mike Johnson flies to Minneapolis to do a sit-down with him. That's that's very, very cool.
Yeah. Mike from College Point undermining you.
Hey, that's why he was starting to develop his opinions. I mean, he started off as just a caller, just kind of excited to hear a show like mine, and gave him a lot of inspiration, and he started getting more, a little bit more pointed and more opinionated in the calls as he progressed. And look what this guy's become today, man.
Yeah, it's really cool. Towards the end of the show, you say you're going to start issuing refunds for the newsletter.
Yeah, the newsletter never saw the light of day again.
I did not have a long run. After
I didn't like it I didn't want to do it in the beginning anyway.
Yeah,
that was a Russo idea, and I didn't want to really do a newsletter. I felt comfortable with the radio show, and I didn't like deadlines. And then when things fell apart with him, and I started to do it again, and I just didn't have a love for it. I didn't have a passion for it. But I felt bad for the people who believed in it and subscribed to it. So at that point, it's like, all right, I don't think this is coming back. So if you want a refund, please let me know.
Yeah. I wonder why Donny never did a newsletter. Did he?
Donny never did a newsletter.
Because he always wrote his stuff out, and you could tell.
Yeah. Very, very research-oriented. To this day, he is. But, a newsletter is very time-consuming.
Yeah,
and Donnie's a ball of energy. If he's going to say, I'm going to interview this guy or Tim McCarver or this baseball person or this wrestling person, he does his research, he gets it done, he files it. But as far as him being able to focus on a newsletter, I don't think that he had it in his DNA.
Yeah, could have been a great contributor, but not lead.
Correct.
Yeah, gotcha. I got one last clip here that I want to play because it's also a tease for next week's episode.
All righty.
And also next week, we are assembling right now. Our producer Bruce Jacobs working feverishly on what we're calling the Old Timers Legends Roundtable. We're going to have 4 or 5 legends on the phone together, and it's going to be a pretty exciting show. That's next week. We're going to try to get as many world champions as possible together. Some guys who maybe have never faced each other before, like Dory Funk Jr., Bruno Sammartino, a couple of these guys, and you'll be able to talk to them and really talk about the good old days in wrestling. And, of course, we'll cover all the recent happenings and up-to-date news right here. And we've been following it. Today we got a call regarding a story that has been unconfirmed. Now, I didn't want to bring this up, but I'm going to anyhow. What should I do, Bruce? One of the people who run this 900 number, it was reported to me a couple hours before we went on the air, and I've been trying to reach Dave Meltzer to confirm it. We heard this is unconfirmed report, okay? I'm not making it up. I've heard that Mr. Vince McMahon resigned as president of Titan Sports. I don't know if it's true or not true. We're trying to find out imminently, and if we know something, obviously we'll report it tomorrow as well. So that is what we heard.
Should we tell them?
McMahon days are numbered.
Well, I mean, I tell you, we focus. There's, that's a big story that breaks, and we talk about it on the next week's episodes. That we have both shows, the morning show and the evening show. But that Legends Roundtable, that was an assignment I gave to Bruce Jacobs, and he just wasn't able to get it done, so that never happened.
Without a hitch. Yeah.
What are you going to do? For whatever reason, I don't remember. I mean, he probably just didn't get the cooperation from these people he was trying to. I gave him the assignment to call.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even then, how many times do we have you trying to get people on the phone, and it just came down to, I don't know, try them at home right now. Let's see if they're home. And you just would call. And
yeah, I throw things at Bruce all the time. Do this, call this guy, tell it's like you just hope you're throwing like shit at the wall, and you hope something sticks. And a lot of times it did, and a lot of times it didn't.
Yeah.
But tell you what sticks next week is that Paul E show.
Yeah,
that'll be something you're going to want to save. If you're not a patron, you better become one this week if you want to hear that whole show unedited.
Yeah, that's going to be hard to come up with clips from both shows.
That's worth a year of membership. That's worth $6, which is $5 a month for 12 months, just to hear and have that Paul E show in its entirety. Which for me, spoiler alert or whatever, I was fucking devastated at the end of that show next week.
Did you think that was the end?
Because of what he did. It wasn't the end because he went on tour to Southeast Asia with me.
No, well, not that. But do you think that was the end of your show? Do you think you were going to get pulled?
I did. Because it was not good.
And wasn't on your night shows, wasn't there always somebody from the station there?
Yeah, Randy Bassett was always there.
Yeah.
And he was there. I believe he was there also. And, maybe that's why when I'm looking at the cassettes, I can't say that that's the reason. Maybe, I don't, because I had a couple other shows on EVD from Southeast Asia. We had two shows, one on 7/3, show 225, one on July the 10th from Southeast Asia on EVD. And then when I look at it, I'm not back on EVD until September. Or I'm not even on it. Because that's like Warlord Barbarian in the studio with NYG. In the studio. Where's the gym? Because I'd booked them at a personal appearance. But yeah, the last EVD show really only happens on July the 10th from Southeast Asia.
Oh, wow.
So that's after next week's. Once
Holbro pulls, was that the end of EVD?
Well, that's exactly right, because we start talking about that next week, too. It's like the furniture guy, the car dealer, sheriff, whatever it was, and Holbro Paints, their contracts was up. And I kept telling Paulie on the show, their contracts are up this week.
Yeah.
And that was it. Without their advertiser support, there was no way to get back on EVD. And, I'm sure they weren't happy with
how that show went.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll talk about it when we get there for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it is kind of neat when you think about it, too, because like you said, there was that one episode that we had not that long ago. It was your last day on the one station.
Yeah.
And when you leave EVD, it more or less just comes down to, well, there's no more money and everyone's mad at me, so I guess that's that.
Yeah. Especially, because I have a convention that I'm going to start to announce soon in October.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing, 9/25/93. I can't believe, it's like, I'm sorry if I'm boring anyone out there, but it's show 237, and then show 238 to 39, 40, 41. There's no shows. It's crazy what's going to happen. So anyway, enjoy what you can for now. We're going to cover it each and every week. We got lots of shows to go because then we go into 1994 and they have all of that stuff. And then the cycle will start all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And you, again, you have no recollection of how long the Jim Herd thing went for, huh?
No, I have no freaking clue.
I imagine the best hint we get is the commercials probably stop playing because every ad break, it was the real wrestling.
Yeah, why did I even do that? That was kind of ridiculous. If you hear it once, that's all you need. You don't need to hear it every fucking 10 minutes. I'm criticizing myself from 30 years ago.
And I think that your 900 number was still on anyways, which was like $4.99 a minute or whatever.
I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I had to give those up to do the Herd thing too.
Yeah, it could be. All right. Well, let's see if any of those
lots
come back
to
up.
Unpack, Marsh. And I thought this was going to be a half-hour show. We're already into an hour 40. Look at that.
Yeah. That's what I said. There was a lot more to Jim Herd than I thought. Because I know when you first started, I was like, it's just Jim Herd. I was kind of like, there's a lot of questions I have now. Let's not skim this one, I don't think. So next week's going to be Ruckus. This is a nice lead-in to cover.
And very wise of you to not to do 3 shows in once. I mean, to save these other shows till next week was a good call. Very good call.
I think it'll be good. The morning show, primarily about Vince resigning. The evening show, primarily about the spiral, downward spiral
from Paul.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think it'll be good. It'll be good. I'm excited for next week.
Well, thank you so much, Marsh. It's another incredible week here. And let everybody know where to find you on social media and some of the other projects you're working on right now.
They can find me at Ref Marsh on Twitter. Probably a little more active on Instagram, even though I don't post a lot on either. But I'm at Marsh Ref over there. YouTube.com/Queen of Carnage. Me and Medusa have been talking a lot about stuff. She's watched the Sunny Dark Side of the Ring with Chris Candido and Sunny.
Oh.
She and Tammy were very close for a long time. So she had a lot to say about that. So that's worth checking out.
Where do you find that one?
YouTube.com/Queen of Carnage.
That's up there now?
Yeah. The first half is up there now. And then coming up this, by the time this drops, actually, it'll all be up. There's 2 parts.
I'm going to check that one out. And she's coming to Nashville, by the way.
Yeah.
In August. She's got a monster truck event. And she's got a personal signing on August the 5th. Here in Tennessee, which I'm definitely going to go to. I got to call her up. Tell her that, when you speak to her again, I know she called me when she was here for NWA. She called me really early in the morning, and she was in Winston-Salem or something. And so she said, I only have a half an hour, and I think it was like 7:30 or 8 in the morning.
Yeah.
So I don't even turn my phone on till 9. I don't. I just don't. I shut it off at 10 o'clock at night, and I turn it back on at like 9 the next day. That's what I do. So anyway, you tell her that I'm going to call her up for our morning coffee, and I want to talk about her coming to Nashville in August. And I definitely want to get together with her for dinner or do something and do a little hang with her.
Yeah, make some time. Give you a ride around in one of those trucks.
Hell yeah.
Drive around town in one of them.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much. And that'll wrap up this edition of John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight. Join our private group on Facebook, facebook.com/Pro Wrestling Spotlight podcast and radio show. And go to Matt Memories. I'm putting up some really good content up there, some really old photographs, and we got 1.5 million impressions over the last 28 days. I mean, with the historic classic photos from my archives up there. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel now. It's youtube.com/Pro Wrestling Spotlight. We're finally at the point where we can monetize, and it's really important. Subscribe to it. Check out the content up there. And, of course, patrons, I really appreciate everything that you do for us. And that's patreon.com/John Arezzi. I want to thank our producer and creative director, Marsh, and thanks to those Patreon executive producers, Anthony Pyrus and Joe Holloway, and for each and every one of you for your support, helping with the production costs for this show. Until next week, when we relive more history with Paulie Dangerously, Paul Heyman, which is going to be a show you don't want to miss. This is John Arezzi for Pro Wrestling Spotlight.